delegation is an act of self-care. First of all, it's having the thought of, I'm overwhelmed, I need help, and then taking action to get that help, whether it's from a virtual assistant, an executive assistant, someone else on your team, whomever it is. But asking for help is really hard. Asking for what we need is even harder. There could be fear of rejection in the way. No, I can't help you with that right now. Right? So it's no, and then we feel, oh, we shouldn't have asked. Asking for help also might mean subconsciously that we're not able to do it ourselves. So there's a competence issue that we're kind of rubbing up against, right? I can't actually do this myself, right? It's not just that I don't have time, but maybe the perception, by the other person is going to be, oh, Kelly can't do that? Fine, I'll do it, but Kelly can't do it, right? So we have this story that we create in our minds.
Welcome to another episode of the Master Delegator podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest who is an expert in trauma-informed leadership, a keynote speaker, and the founder of Consciousness Leaders. They're on a mission to help us understand why many entrepreneurs struggle with delegation. Joining us today is the awesome Kelly Campbell. Kelly is not only a trauma-informed leadership coach, but also a podcast host and the author of the book, Heal to Lead. Today, we delve into the intricacies of delegation and how childhood control mechanisms play a pivotal role in shaping an entrepreneur's ability to let go. We'll be exploring why entrepreneurs struggle with delegation and how healing from past experiences is a key to unlocking effective leadership. Welcome to the Master Delegator podcast, Kelly. I'm so happy that you are here. I don't remember what month it is, but just last year, I think mid last year, I was on your podcast, Thrive podcast, and now you're on my podcast. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. Thanks, Kristy.
Yeah, you're welcome. So before we dive in, could you share a bit about your journey and how you became passionate about trauma-informed leadership?
Well, it's been a long journey. I owned a digital marketing agency for 14 years. And after I sold that in 2016, I started consulting, and the consulting sort of led to coaching because I knew that there was something a little bit deeper under the surface. Consulting is in some ways deep from an operational standpoint or from a people standpoint or from, a revenue standpoint, but it's not getting at the heart of like what's going on underneath the surface of the leaders or of the employees, right? And when I say underneath the surface, that's all I want to talk about. That's all I care about. What drives us as humans? And I think I've always been really fascinated by that, even all the way back to college, taking, lots of psychology courses. I didn't think that the direction for my work in the world was going to be, to become a therapist. That's not what I was interested in. But, it's funny, the things that you're drawn to when you're younger, they come around because that's actually what you're very passionate about.
They pull you back.
They pull you back. So, it was sort of in consulting and then thinking about my experience and my journey as a leader, as a young social entrepreneur, and trying to correlate, well, what were the reasons why I showed up that way, or why did I behave this way or think this way? So I got really introspective. And I was also noticing this in tandem with the clients that I was working with. They were talking about how burnt out they were and how overwhelmed, and many of them suffered from anxiety, some from depression, some from, other mental illness. And I was like, why are we not talking about this, right? And I'm not talking about unpacking what happened to them in their childhood, but certainly having a conversation to say, whatever did happen, how is that influencing the current leadership style? And so, yeah, it's been a long journey, probably, over 2 decades, but I'm here now and I'm a certified trauma-informed leadership coach. And I am so honored to be doing this work in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing amazing things, and I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people out there who could use your help, and that's why I'm very excited, to get a copy of your book. And I know I can pre-order that on Amazon, and I'm very, very, very excited. It's coming out in April. So could you please give us a little bit of overview of your book?
So the book is really a culmination of everything that I've been doing in this space. But I sort of frame it as a lot of people are familiar with conscious leadership. I mean, it's a fairly new term, but it's a practice of leadership that came out of the conscious capitalism movement from about a decade ago. John Mackey, who is the former CEO of Whole Foods, and Raj Sisodia sort of had this idea that like very brilliant and sort of necessary idea that businesses are not solely meant to create profit, right? They are there to support the people that are inside of the organization. They're there to be a steward to the environment. They're not there to extract from the environment, and they're there to make a profit. But all of those things are on equal plane. And so, conscious leadership sort of was born out of that conscious capitalism movement. And I've been very interested in that. And a lot of people have been talking about that lately in the last couple of years, especially as the pandemic sort of brought everyone, to their knees in a way. And I kept thinking about this idea that one of the things that everybody says now is so important to becoming a leader, a really effective leader, is to develop self-awareness. But I've never heard anybody say, and this is how you do that. And what I posit in the book is that the number one most effective way to develop self-awareness is to really look at your own trauma and to look at the experiences that have shaped you, right? Because we're not one person when we go to work and another person at home. We're the same person, and we're wearing masks and we're employing strategies that, keep us safe. And that's really what it is. It's a quest for safety wherever we go. So if we start to understand what's sort of underneath all of that, we can start to commit to making different changes in our life and behaving different ways and setting healthier boundaries, for example, which I know will definitely resonate with everyone listening to this. So the book is really a framework for high conscious leadership, which the number one fundamental is trauma integration. So it's a different way to think about leadership, very, very different way to think about it. But I don't think that anyone people have tied these things together very loosely, or they've used different language, but nobody says the thing, right? No one wants to talk about trauma.
No, yeah.
Everybody has it. So why are we not talking about it?
Yeah, it's kind of like mental health, right? Like people don't want to talk about it because when somebody hears someone having mental health issues, they're like, oh, that person's crazy. Something's going on with that person's brain, Yeah. Right. And wow, I love everything about you said, conscious leadership. And that's something, I have learned and I've been trying to apply to myself as a leader of my business. Every time something happens, it's normal, to be reactive, but I think after you give yourself some time to process everything that happened, it's important to ask yourself, like, what have I contributed to this situation, right? And how can I be a part of the solution, and instead of blaming other people. And so can you define what trauma is?
Trauma, in my definition, because if you Google it, you'll get lots and lots of different definitions. The word trauma comes from the Greek root for the word wound, right? But the way that I define trauma is just unintegrated information, right? Mm-hmm. So trauma is not the experiences, and this isn't my quote, this is Dr. Gabor Mate, but trauma, it's not the events that have happened to you. It's what happens inside of you because of those events, right? So you and I could go in and experience the exact same event. We're going to have very different reactions, and we're going to remember it differently. And the experience will be stored differently in our body, in our nervous system, in our fascia, in our muscles, right? Those things are stored differently depending upon our composition. So, I mean, trauma, a lot of people think, well, I had a great childhood. I didn't have trauma, but I can guarantee you 100% of us have experienced some moment when we were between 0 and 14 where we were felt embarrassed or humiliated, or had a big T trauma, like a physical attack, or lived in a war-torn country, or something, that according to the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study from the 1990s, that would be defined as that. But it's not just that. There's only about a dozen things on that list, which is not, in my opinion, is not an exhaustive list. But it's not just about the big T trauma that we all think of, right? It's actually sort of the death by 1,000 paper cuts analogy, right? The things that were ongoing and chronic and tiny little digs into our story of who we were, those are the things that really could be just as impactful as a big T trauma. So, I think that there's an understanding and an education that needs to be created around that word.
Yeah, I love that you defined trauma, because like what you said, some people when they think about trauma, they think about those big things that happen. Somebody got into an accident, I got a trauma.
Yeah.
But I actually have a friend. I grew up in the Philippines. You already know that. My listeners already know that. So in the Philippines, we're so big about having lighter skin. Whereas here in the States, people here were all about, I want to get a tan skin, I want to go to the beach. So in the Philippines, I have a friend, and she's still my friend. She has lighter skin than most Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was younger, I think around 7 or 9 years old, somebody told her, you know what? I'm glad you have lighter skin, because if not, you're gonna be ugly. That is what was told towards her. And then up until now, she's trying to heal from that one sentence comment. And
Right.
then there's this another friend, like all of us, because we were close friends when I was in the Philippines. It's like, and there's a group of friends that were really close to her, and we're like wondering, why is this person kind of self-entitled, and she wanted people to always tell her that she's beautiful. Like she would send us a photo of her like with makeup and wearing something beautiful, and she wanted us to tell her that she's beautiful and she's gorgeous. And of course, because we're kind of like forced to say that to her, we're kind of like, nope, we're not gonna tell you that. And then we found out, she explained to us that the reason why she's like that, because her parents didn't even tell her that she's beautiful when she was younger. So I was like, that is like just mind blowing. And that affected her even until now, because she dressed differently, and she feels like when she puts a makeup on, that's when she looks beautiful. So those are samples of traumas, right?
100%.
Awesome. Cool. And what happens when leaders lead without dealing with their trauma?
I mean, you know the answer to this. We've all had bosses where, or we see leaders in the political realm, in government. We see them in corporations. What happens is we all lose. Even they lose, right? Because if they're not dealing with what has happened to them, and they're not self-aware enough and interested enough and courageous and willing enough to explore what's happened to them, then they take that out on and project that wounding onto other people, and they cause more harm. And we see this every day when it comes to legislation or laws that get passed in the United States in particular. I mean, all across the world, but we're here, so we're talking about that. We're on the receiving end, so we're talking about that. What your example really highlighted was that one comment, right? And then that embedded itself in that person's psyche. But then you couple that with sort of an ongoing deficit of validation from the parents, right? And it's the perfect storm. So now there's such a lack of self-worth. And that's what you see in leaders, is lack of self-worth. Many times more of our aggressive leaders, more of the people who are very outspoken, what they experienced when they were younger was a sense of powerlessness. Okay. So they felt powerless in the situation because maybe, they were told they weren't good enough, or they were maybe physically abused, or whatever the case may be. So there was a powerlessness that they felt in childhood, and they were small. So they literally didn't have any power to leave the situation or fight back. Right. So when they get older, subconsciously or unconsciously, their number one motivation is really to never feel powerless again. And so what that means is that they're stepping on other people, they're causing harm, they're doing all of this. So that's, and that's only one way that it shows up. It's not that only our most aggressive leaders or most vocal leaders are the ones who are wounded. It's also the ones who are pleasing, overly pleasing, right? That's a trauma response as well. So in the book, I talk about this. I break it down pretty simply and pretty easily with people controllers and people pleasing leaders, and how neither one of those is effective. And I said before, we've all had bosses or leaders in our own lives, whether that was in our religious organization that we were a part of, or maybe our first job or whatever, right? We've all seen what ineffective leadership looks like. So what I'm interested in is, what does effective leadership look like? What does high conscious leadership look like? And it all starts healing and integrating these things.
I love that. And in terms of delegation, why do you think some entrepreneurs just find it hard to let go of their tasks and responsibilities?
Oh, wow. This is such a great question, Kristy. And I think that, there's a lot that I want to sort of unpack with this, because I think it's going to be really, I don't know, it's going to highlight some things for the people who are listening. So the first thing that I would say about delegation, and I was not historically good at delegation because of some of the things that I'm going to tell you. But now I understand delegation is an act of self-care.
I love that.
It really is. If you think about what it is, it's asking for, first of all, it's having the thought of, I'm overwhelmed, I need help, and then taking action to get that help, whether it's from a virtual assistant, an executive assistant, someone else on your team, whomever it is. But asking for help is really hard, right? Asking for what we need is even harder. There could be fear of rejection in the way. No, I can't help you with that right now, right? So it's no, and then we feel, oh, we shouldn't have asked. Asking for help also might mean subconsciously that we're not able to do it ourselves. So there's a competence issue that we're kind of rubbing up against, right? I can't actually do this myself, right? It's not just that I don't have time, but maybe the perception, by the other person is going to be, oh, Kelly can't do that? Huh. Fine, I'll do it, but Kelly can't do it, right? So we have this story that we create in our minds. And I think if we zoom out even further and we really think about this through the lens of, a trauma-informed practice, what we're actually doing is, if we have, let's say we bring on a VA or an EA, and we want to set them up for success, right? Everyone says, I want to set my assistant up for success. But here's where it gets a little tricky. If we set other people up for failure, then that gives us confirmation bias that I can't trust other people. Other people don't take care of me.
That's good.
I asked so-and-so to do this thing and they didn't do it, right? So I can't trust them to take on something larger as a responsibility.
Yeah.
But what you said early on in the conversation is, where are we looking at the ways that we contributed to that? I see this all the time with some of the leaders that I coach. They'll say, oh, I asked my assistant to do X and they failed miserably. I said, well, where was the documentation and the video and how did you set them up for success in all of the ways? And they're like, oh, yeah, I didn't really. I just sent an email and said, can you do this thing? And it didn't really have all of the details. So what I'm positing there is, yes, I get that you're busy. I get that you're in a state of overwhelm, But if you truly want to set that person up for success and disrupt a pattern that I can't trust people to take care of other things, or I can't trust people to take care of me, then put the time in to set them up for success. I only actually deeply learned this about 3.5 years ago when I was thinking about bringing on an executive assistant, because I was at that point of I can't possibly do all of this by myself anymore. And the greatest thing I ever did was 2 weeks before he started, I literally went through and wrote down every single thing that I did, how I did it, even down to verbiage for email templates. This is the voice and the tone that I use, and I want a consistent experience, between myself and him for clients. I recorded screencasts of here's how I do this in my email marketing program, all the things that I'm sure that you're already advocating for. But what I was doing was I was really disrupting a pattern, because my inherent belief from childhood is that I can't trust anyone to care for me. So I was giving him the opportunity to care for me and setting him up to successfully take care of me. And he does every single day. It's a very different way of looking at it. But if you start to dig a little deeper, all this stuff makes sense. I'm not saying anything that's irrational, right?
Right. Yeah, I love it. You were disrupting pattern. And once you broke that pattern, you gave more opportunities for delegation to come in.
Are you sick and tired of being overwhelmed and afraid you'll never scale your business? Meet Smart VAs. Unlike many virtual assistant agencies that only assign one dedicated virtual assistant, we provide flexibility for growing businesses by assigning a team of experienced virtual assistants that can do different tasks to support your continuous growth. Visit smartvas.online to book a free discovery call and start growing your business.
Delegation is definitely an act of self-care, because if we don't delegate, we get overwhelmed and stressed, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever met somebody who owns a big business that does it alone?
That does it alone?
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Never. Okay, it's a
If
good
they
sign,
did it
right?
alone, if they did it alone, it wouldn't be a big business, number one. And number two, it probably wouldn't be sustainable, even if they could do that in the short term. I think about leaders sometimes like the Elon Musks of the world, right? Where I remember this story, I don't know, it was a couple of years ago, where he had a really great executive assistant. The executive assistant went out, I think, for maternity leave or some kind of FMLA or something. And while she was gone, he was like, I don't need her. I can do this myself. I'm going to automate everything. And she tried to come back to a job, and he fired her because he's like, look, all these things automatically happen now. I've programmed you out of your job. And it's just fascinating to me that, it's not just the doing, right? It's not just the actions and the tasks that get completed. It's in the thank you for handling that for me. My nervous system now feels complete. It's in the conversations, the check-ins, the holding each other accountable, right?
The collaborations, partnerships.
Yeah. So I think that, he has a lot to learn. And I don't think that it's sustainable. I think at some point, and he's a fairly young guy, at some point he will just burn out. He will cycle out. Something's gonna happen. I hope not, but
yeah. I mean,
so
something is going on already, based on, what I'm seeing on the news, but
yeah. Oh yeah, Neuralink. Oh, that's a whole nother podcast.
Let's not go there now.
Let's not go there now. That is an interesting thing, again, for a different show. But yeah, talking about, delegation from the technology and AI and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, wow, I feel like we can talk all day about this. But what I want to know is, if I am, let's say, I'm a business owner with a growing business, but I don't want to delegate because I don't trust the people
Yep.
and I can do everything on my own. I have that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
What would you advise me?
Well, the first question I would ask is, how's that working for you? I mean, really get honest. Like, how is that working for you? Are you working until midnight? Are you in a state of overwhelm? Are you on maybe anxiety or depression medication? That's not a judgment. That's just a question. How's your relationship with your spouse or your children if you have them? How are your personal relationships? How's your health, your actual physical health? Do you get to the gym? Do you go for a walk? If you're trying to do everything and all of those things are suffering, or a portion of those things are suffering, then is it actually working? Right. So that's where I would go first in the conversation. And that's coming very much from a trauma informed coaching situation. And then maybe I might ask, what, if the same situation, like let's say, look at your work life balance today, imbalance, and think of yourself a year from now. So you've probably been doing this for a couple of years already, but now think of a whole nother year where nothing has changed and you're in the exact same spot a year from now. Does that feel like that would be okay? Are you okay with that? If the answer is no, then my question is, well, what is the impact of continuing in this direction, right? Oh man, I'm probably just going to keep gaining weight. I might get divorced because I never see my spouse. I don't spend time with my kids and I would like to do that. They're getting older. Maybe they're, going to be in high school soon and then, out of the house in college and I'm going to miss them. And yeah, I just like anxiety wise, I'm starting to develop some health issues because of that. Okay. So if the impact looks like some of these things, then are you courageous and willing enough to make a change?
Right. Yeah, those are
I go
good
from that
questions.
angle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you ever met somebody who's very in denial about their current situation? They're like, oh, everything's good. I don't have any problems, even though they do have 1 million problems. Like, how do you get somebody out of that mental state?
So I would say the majority of people are in denial, right? Because again, back to what you said at the top of the show, no one wants to talk about mental health. No one
Mhm.
wants to admit that their life doesn't look like their Instagram profile, right?
Right.
Um, but we have to get real. We can't keep going in this direction. So I would sort of employ those same questions and just use very again, Gabor Mate calls this compassionate inquiry, right? So just a series of questions based on what is coming back, where we're sort of in this verbal dance, right? I'm asking questions, I'm basing my follow-up questions or additional questions on how they're responding. And I would try to get to the root of, are you really fine?
Hmm.
Right? Are we really fine? What are we doing here? Um, or, just noticing certain things, right? I saw, some kids running behind you on your screen. I heard that your phone is going off. Have you been able to dedicate, the time to even have this conversation today? Oh, no, that's impossible. Does every day look like that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every single day, Monday through Sunday. How's that working for you, right? And so you just getting them back into this kind of framework and this kind of conversation, so that ultimately you're empowering them to realize, I'm not fine, I need help, I need to ask for help. And whatever stories I've created around not asking for help, they are not true, and now it's time to bring someone in.
Yeah, I love that. So I was on a 3-day, actually 2.5 retreat recently, and the facilitator asked people to stand up if they need help with something so that other people can, speak life over to them, kind of like that. So a few people, they stood up. And so I went into closer to this person who stood up because I thought she needed help. But then I went up to her and then she told us, there were two of us there, the facilitator and me were partnered together to kind of help out this person. And she was telling us briefly about what she needs, about her goals for this year and all that kind of stuff. And then the facilitator went on encouraging her, blah, blah, blah. I went on encouraging her. The facilitator went on encouraging her again. And after that, she was just like, no, that's not what I need. I forgot what exactly she said, but it's as if she didn't want to take in anything that we, told her, or we recommended her, or we advised her. And so during that situation, I was a bit kind of offended in a way. It's like, why did you even stand up if you're not going to listen, or if you're not going to, take what we're going to say or anything, if you don't think you needed help. So I was like offended a little bit about that. And so I stayed quiet, and I let the facilitator, who's the coach in that room, kind of continue speaking to her. And then after that, I was like, never mind, you're not going to listen to me. So my mindset was like that during that situation. But then, I don't know, something spoke to me and kind of like told me to continue encouraging her. And so I just did my best to continue encouraging her. I said, hey, you know what? I said, you know what? I admired you for taking down notes of your goals for this year. I think that's a good first step. And then we ended that way. Then after that, because I was bothered, I went to the facilitator and I said, hey, do you think this person that, we helped, do you think she's a little bit hesitant and kind of like closed doors, when it comes to like letting people into their life? And she's like, yes, actually, I've helped her with so many things, and she just have a different culture in terms of where she was when she was a kid. And I told her, because I was a little bit offended, but I did not. But after talking to her about it, I was like, I felt at ease, because I thought to myself, why would I be offended, if I didn't do anything wrong? So I'm kind of like trying to process. And I said, well, I'm just going to understand that person. Maybe she's going through something. So I feel like, because I believe in the statement, hurt people hurt people. If you're hurt, then there's a tendency that you're going to hurt other people too, right? And so during that time, I was just like trying my best to really understand her and to not take it personally, because I think it's one thing to meet a person that's healing. It's another thing if you are that person that is still also healing. I can say that I'm still healing from everything, I don't know when I'm gonna get there. I feel like every day of our life we may get trauma, seeing something from social media, we may, feel negatively about it. And so I feel like if a person is healing, is in the progress of healing, and you are still also healing, if you put them together in one room and they don't understand each other, it's going to be a problem, if that makes sense.
It all makes so much sense. And thank you for sharing that example. I mean, I have a few things to say about that. If
Sure, yeah,
you want to chat about it, we're all still healing.
Mm-hmm.
We're all actively healing. There is no destination, right? So if you've committed to healing, to exploring, what's kind of underneath your own composition and your ego and all of that, then that's a lifelong commitment, right? So we should walk into every single room thinking, yes, I'm actively healing. And there may be many people in this room who are either actively healing or unconscious to the wounds that they have. And I can have compassion for all of them, right? The other thing I was going to say is, as you are talking to her and you're getting offended because she's not sort of buying into what you're suggesting, your encouragement, your advice, your guidance, that's your ego talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your ego is still very much online to say, I suggested something, I think it's the right thing for her, and she's not buying, so there must be something wrong with her, right? And now I'm offended and I'm in sort of a defensive stance. From a trauma-informed coaching lens, we are not advising, we're not guiding, we're not even mentoring. We're empowering that person to say, what do you think you need? Mm-hmm. What do you think would be helpful in this situation? We're never actually asking or proposing, I should say. We're never proposing, I think this is what you're doing. If we're doing that, we're actually consulting.
Right.
That's a whole different thing.
Yes.
Right? Because in this kind of container, we think of the client. In this case, that person in your facilitation program was the client, right? So the client is the subject matter expert of her own life. You are not the expert of her life. You're the expert of your life, right? So how could you know what would be helpful to her, which is why she bristled, right? She was like, no, that's not what I need, because you said something that was very either confronting to her or was really not what she needed. Intuitively, we all know what we need. It just takes sometimes a little, little inquiry to kind of get there. I think it's beautiful that you were doing that work with her. And maybe next time you're in that container, you're sitting in a little bit of a different seat, right? You're asking more questions that are empowering that person, and your ego is offline. So however they show up is more about them. It's not about you.
Yeah. And it's so easy to put yourself first, right?
I mean, that's default for most people.
Yeah. It's so easy.
Live in this world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, those are very good insights, Kelly. So as we wrap up, how do you think we can all be better leaders?
I mean, really, it's again about the courage and the willingness to look at the things that have happened to you when you were younger, even if you're rolling your eyes, even if you've been to therapy or are currently in therapy and you're like, yeah, I'm doing that. We need to do more than that, right? This is really about that lifelong commitment that I talked about, to understand, yes, yourself, but how your own healing journey is actually going to benefit not only you, but all of the people in your life, the people in your organization, your colleagues, the people in your community, the people in your family, because you're a leader of lots and lots of different things.
Yes.
Right? You're not just a leader at work if you're a director or the CEO or a small business. You're the director of your family, even if it's just you and a partner or partners. I think sometimes we get caught up on this leader, right? That it has to be the executive director of a nonprofit, or it has to be the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. But if you're owning a small business, a consultancy, some kind of practice where you're delivering a service or even a product, and that business is small, really small, under 10 employees, under 2 employees, right? You're still a leader. And a lot of people have an issue kind of putting that coat on, but you're still a leader in lots of different areas of your life, business included.
Right.
So healing is beneficial for every one of the people in your life. It's also really beneficial for, this planet that we live on, because the more that we heal, we understand that we have a responsibility to take care of the land that we are inhabiting. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's so powerful and it's so impactful. And I think if people really understood the magic of this work, I think more people would be like, yeah, it sounds hard, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think that's where the courage comes in.
Nothing is easy in life anyway.
True. Right? So you could have adversity, which is going to happen anyway, or you can try to show up a little bit more the way that you want to show up, right?
Right.
Instead of pretending.
Wow. I love this conversation that we have, Kelly. Wow. I mean, I don't want to end this, but I need to. This is your time to tell people about, your promotions, your book, and how can they find you online.
The book is available for pre-order. It's coming out April 16th. So it's available on Amazon, or if you want to learn a little bit more about it other than what's on the Amazon description page, my website is just klcampbell.com.
I will definitely pre-order, and I'm going to recommend this to my clients and to my team members as well. So are you the sole author of this book, or do you have other contributors?
Nope, sole author.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Kelly. I appreciate it.
Kristy, I appreciate it. This was a really fun conversation.
Yes, it is.